Welcome to Podsauce. I am Alesha Renee.
And I'm Dax Holt. Alesha, why are you not here for our podcast discovery show? Look at this. Do you mind if I use your chair today?
Get your feet off of my lap. Get those critters.
No, that's not okay?
Get those 2.1 on the wiki feet off of my lap.
It is a 4.8, Alesha.
It's juicy. Definitely not a 5.0.
Oh, we got a fun show today. I'm excited.
We do. We have a super fun show today. I hope that I'm able to keep it together because you know what this podcast does to me, this particular our guest that we have on today. We regret to inform you, the Rejection Podcast, because you put me on to them. I have called you many a times from the side of the road. I'm doing the ugly cry right now.
Just crying, bawling. But that's the thing. I knew the second I had heard this podcast, I was like, Alesha's gonna like this because, well, you're an actress. We've talked about our careers, our ups, our downs, all that kind of stuff. And I think hearing a podcast that's not just devoted to, oh, this celebrity's had an amazing rise to stardom, but there's been bumps in the road. There's been things that they've had to overcome. I think we can relate to that. And I think that's what makes this podcast so good.
I mean, Dee, it's the story behind the journey really that allows me to champion even more so for your favorite's favorite, because let's just keep it funky. If everything was rainbows and ponies for whoever is that person to you, I just don't think that we would be that invested in them, right? Mm-hmm. Struggle is relatable, it's palatable, it's something that is not exclusive to one particular race or, age demographic, ethnicity, or whatever. We all know that the journey to success is not linear. It ebbs and it flows, and to be able to draw strength from, because that's what I love about Regret to Inform You. It's not just the celebrity aspect of it, but they also talk about movies and the journey that it took to get this movie done, Splash or Pretty Woman, movies that are iconic to us now, but back then got told no 50 million times, but it was that 50 million and one that put it before us, and we're grateful for it.
Well, not only that, I got you turned into this on someone that you're not necessarily a fan of. I'm a huge Lisa Kudrow Friends fan, right. But that episode hit me so hard. I'm like, you have to listen to this, and the struggle that this actress had through many, many, many years, and basically almost, gave up her career and pushed through and became the highest paid actress on television. Mm-hmm.
I mean, get into it. And it's not that I got anything against Lisa Kudrow. I just don't know her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wasn't a Friends fan. I was I've shared this many times. We all know the story of Friends, came from living single. The creators of Friends have admitted that themselves. So I'm not spilling tea or anything like that. So, I more so came at it well, I want the Black actors and actresses to get their things. But you're right, Dee. When you hear the story, it's all relative, and it's not relegated to, again, your ethnicity or your age. It's just, it's struggle and it's triumph and it's self-perseverance. And how do we dig deep to find that thing to keep going?
All right, Alesha, I'm excited for them. I can't wait. I think you guys are going to love it, but stick around. We got so much more coming up on Podsauce.
Welcome back to Podsauce, guys, your podcast discovery show. It's that time of the day where Dax has his say. You like that?
I like it. That's good.
I gave you a jingle. You got a pick for me, don't you?
I got a good pick for you this week, Alesha. I have been excited to bring this one to you. You know me. I am someone that likes short, concise episodes of podcasts. I don't like necessarily to do a whole long run of 15. I did it on this one. And I checked it out, and I absolutely loved it. It's called The Dropout. And this whole podcast is about Elizabeth Holmes. And I don't know if you've ever heard that name. Elizabeth Holmes was the world's youngest self-made female billionaire.
Nope, writing it down.
Okay.
Yes, with the pill chick, right?
Not a pill. She was the CEO of Theranos, which was a company that they were basically building machines so that one drop of blood could test for 100 different diseases or anything in your blood. And it was going to revolutionize the medical industry because instead of taking vials and vials of blood and people being scared of that, you would literally prick your finger and 100 different tests, okay? So she raised millions and millions of dollars. The whole thing was a fraud, like complete fraud. They made it into Walgreens. They had Theranos stations, and what they were doing was they were supposed to have these machines, but they were actually taking the blood back to laboratories, testing it like in the normal ways. But a lot of this stuff, because it was a simple prick of blood, they were getting wrong answers. So imagine you go in and your test comes back and they're like, oh, you're diabetic, and you're not. And now you start taking medications for, I mean, the whole thing is so crazy, but the levels of deception and fraud that these people went to hide it. And not only that, she was obsessed with Steve Jobs. Everything about it. She'd go and get photos taken like Steve. She started wearing black turtlenecks. I mean, she had a fake voice, Leisha. She dropped her voice and had a fake voice. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. So you got to check out this podcast. It's so good.
Y'all let the white woman trick y'all again? You let the white woman trick you again, huh? Is that how we're doing it? Trickery was afoot.
Just so afoot. I mean, oh my God, it was such a crazy podcast. And I'm telling you, like I said, I don't listen to like lots and lots of episodes, but with this one, I got hooked in, and I was like, oh, what's next? What's next? Like, where does the deceit lie now? And so you got to check it out. The Dropout, about Elizabeth Holmes' crazy life.
Give me the skinny. Is she running free, or is she locked? Is she doing an ACON and she's locked up?
No, right now she is dealing with a huge court battle where she has to go to trial, and they just announced that she's pregnant, so they're pushing the trial back.
Oh! Are you kidding me?
No, not even kidding.
If her name was Monique, she'd be in cell block D, having that baby on the floor. Oh, this is ridiculous. You know what? She just continues to keep swindling y'all. Well, if you guys want to find out more about the Dropout, Dax's pick, please head over to podsauce.com. We got more. This is Podsauce. Don't go anywhere. You see, this is the stuff I'm talking about, Dax.
Welcome back to Podsauce. Oh, Alesha, I'm so excited. How long have we been?
I'm going to try to get through this without crying. We'll start there.
This is a big interview for us. Alesha and I have been talking about this podcast for weeks now. Maybe months? I don't know. We've been talking about this.
A month and a week, to be specific. A month and a week, but who's counting?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this podcast is, I would say, one of our top 2 podcasts out there. We have been talking about it for weeks. We've recommended it to you guys numerous times, but we got on Terry and Sidney O'Reilly from the We Regret to Inform You, a Rejection Podcast. You guys, I'm bowing down to you right now because I love this podcast so much, and if you haven't checked it out, this is a podcast about very successful people in the world, how they got there, and all the rejection that they faced getting there, that it was not an easy climb, this was not an easy rise up. And after the first episode, I looked at Alesha and I was like, you have to listen to this, because Alesha's an actress, and I felt that she would really get a lot from this podcast. So thank you guys for what you do, number one.
Thank you so much. That's so lovely.
Well,
thank you for having us.
Wish I could be in person so you guys could feel honestly, truly, Dax put me on to the Lisa Kudrow episode, right? And at first I was like, yeah, because I wasn't a big, fan of Friends. I was a living single fan. And, if you know the history of Friends, Friends was a derivative of Living Single. But when I listened to it, I want to say like towards the end of Lisa Kudrow's episode was where I pulled over and I called those of us who have our hands on Podsauce. We have a group chat together, and I texted them and I'm like, yo, like I am so upset about this podcast. I'm on the side of the road doing the ugly cry right now because it's just like moving me. And then like Dax said, like since that episode I was hooked. I went from there to the Pretty Woman episode, and that's what I like about it too. It's not just about celebrities, it's about projects, movies that are now big, and some of them, in AFI 100 best films ever, but the journey that it all had to go through to get to where it is now and where we know it to be now. So what was the inspiration behind We Regret to Inform You, the Rejection Podcast?
Well, let me start and then Sid can jump in. So we have another podcast called Under the Influence, which is a long-running podcast about the marketing world. And in that show, there were many stories that I told about inventors or founders of companies that faced incredible rejection until they managed to find a way, and then that product or that company became a huge organization. And I thought that was always fascinating to me. And I brought just the notion of it to our team at Apostrophe Podcasts, Sidney being one of the partners. And I said, is there a standalone show in this that we could look at people's stories from when they start to try and launch a career or a company or a movie or a TV show to the moment it happens, not past that, but just to the moment where finally they break through, and what were their struggles, and then how did they deal with it? How did they get over the speed bumps? And so I brought that to Sid and the team, and they kind of liked it. And then over to you, Sid, on just the writing and the research of it.
Yeah, I mean, another thing I think that was another seed of the show is that we're big, as a family, we're big nonfiction readers. So we read a lot of, autobiographies and biographies. And we found so often in people's stories, in their own stories, they would glaze over the portion of their story where they were rejected. So say it was an actor, they would say something like, I moved to LA, I couldn't get an agent, I couldn't get an audition. So I got an agent and an audition, and then they'd keep going. And we were like, wait, hang on. What happened in that window? Because that window is what people who are struggling could relate to the most, the time when you're in the thick of it and in the grit of it all. And so we thought, okay, if we can dig and we can find out what happens in that window, I think it could really, really help people. So that's kind of, how we came up with the show, and it really evolved from there.
I think the reason that I gravitated to it so much was because you do see these celebrities, you do see these movies out there that when you do see the end product, you just assume their life has been easy. And I think case in point, like Gal Gadot, she just kind of came out of nowhere for me. Little did I know, thanks to your podcast, that was 8 years of her flying back and forth from Israel to the U.S., taking audition, making her family come back and forth with her to the point where she was like, I'm over this. Like, I don't even want to be an actress anymore. This is clearly not for me. And she was about to give up, and they basically begged her to go on the audition for Wonder Woman, which obviously has changed her life. But there was so many of these little stories, and like Leisha said, Lisa Kudrow, I love that story because I was a big Friends fan, but to see her path and how she was just kind of a background actress, barely getting any roles, and the people in her life were even telling her, don't do that audition. There's no point, there's no name for the character. But that no-name character landed her on Friends. And it's just like, I'm getting chills thinking about it right now.
Hey, I'm trying not to cry. That's why I'm like letting you.
It is so good.
Thank you.
I think it's that episode. It was the Brian Grazer episode where he was doing everything that he could, to get his material out there. And it was like one meeting that he had with the lady, with the executive whose bird ended up dying. And
yes,
he was able to be there with that executive and help bury the bird. And then she ended up buying like his first 2 screenplays. Correct me if I'm wrong, because this was one of the earlier episodes that I've listened to. I've since gone on to listen to almost all of your episodes.
Yeah.
And for me, it was, sorry. Whoop, nope. Do the interview,
Don't
girl.
cry. You got this. You got this, Leash.
I'm going to get it together. For me, it was just remembering, and this is why I was so grateful, when we were able to get you guys on, it was just remembering to not discount the small parts, the small interactions, the small meetings with people, because those things could be, and it may not work out in that moment. It may not work out as quickly as it did. And I don't know the time turnover from when he helped bury the bird and they had like a little funeral for the woman's bird, and then she ended up buying his screenplays. I don't even think that matters. I think what matters is that was an encounter, and in the future it all worked out, and that was another opportunity, like the small role for Lisa Kudrow, like the encouragement from Taraji P. Henson's dad to, well, good, I'm glad that you got kicked out, because now you can pursue what I know you really want to do. So, sorry.
You can see this podcast really like affected us, and
Yeah.
it's really a magical podcast.
No, that's
You
so
know,
that's
in our
so
li-
lovely.
in our latest podcast, by the way, Alesha, is about Kurt Warner, a very famous football quarterback. And he was rejected over and over again. He was even reduced to stocking shelves in a grocery store on the graveyard shift. And then 5 years later, he was a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And the theme in that show, which I think is what you're referring to, is your career path is full of detours. And you have to look at those detours as not a throwing you off course, but just a zig to keep. It's just a serpentine way to get to where you're going. And that story of Kurt Warner is a story of detours. And I think that's the thread that really runs through most of our shows is every career has detours. And all of these people we talk about refuse to take no for an answer.
Yes.
Well, I think it comes down to your tagline at the end: never give up. And it is
Never
so
give up.
true. Never give up. You don't know what's on the other end of your trials and tribulations.
Even Stephen King got his book Carrie, I think it was 30, how many times, Sid? 30 something?
30 rejections, 31 was the magic number.
31 was the magic number.
And 30 is a very round number. Like 30 is a perfectly respectable number to say, okay, this has been rejected 30 times. I gave it a good go. We're done. And people around Stephen King would have been like, totally, that
We
makes
get it.
sense. Yeah, good for you. But if he had stopped there, we wouldn't have Carrie and we wouldn't have the wonderful weirdness that is Stephen King in this world. And so it just goes to show that, you know, you'll never know what'll happen if you just go one more time, what you might learn or what you might discover if you just push it one more time.
Right? Because we can hear no so many times. And my God, as an actor, at one point I was thinking my name was no. I'm still trying to gather the fact that my name isn't no, because you know, you still get those no's until I get that one yes that only God knows when and how. But anyways, it's in the end when you see how all of it works out, because you guys will say, oh, this might have been turned down, but now it's like got 5 Academy Award nominations and 3 wins and all of these. By then I have chills up my arms.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, when I was starting my career, Alesha, I was an advertising copywriter. So looking for my first job, I sent out, this is a long time ago now, but I sent out 60 resumes to 60 advertising agencies across the country. And I got back 61 rejection letters. One place even rejected me twice. That's how much they didn't want me. But my point being that was 61 rejections when I'm just trying to get a foot in the door. Nothing, and that was 1981, like that's almost 40 years ago, and nothing has changed as far as trying to get that first big break.
Sidney, out of all of the, people or, movies, whatever that you've covered, who has faced the most rejection out of anyone?
You know, one theme we've seen in a lot of the shows is the number 40. And we talked about this in our wrap-up episode from season 1, is that a lot of pieces of art are rejected 40 times. There's something about that number. I don't know if it's an unlucky number or what, but 40 we see a lot. I think we saw that number in Back to the Future. I think was rejected for, I believe, and I'll check on this, was rejected 40 times, which is just, it's an astounding number to get 40 rejection letters back. It's not 61, so sorry, Dad. That might be the most I've ever seen. But it's
Thank you,
there.
Sidney.
Yeah, sorry. But it's up there. And there's a number of shows that we see the number 40. So yeah, I think Back to the Future is among the most, and that is just a cult classic film. So it's amazing. You think, for example, Lady Gaga, like no one can sing like Lady Gaga. You would think someone would have looked at her and said, oh yeah, like where can I sign her to my label right now? She's so amazing. All these people we think would have undeniable talent, or, Back to the Future, just an unbelievable script idea. It's amazing how many times these people are rejected.
It's also how beautiful how you can have those moments where you think, oh, this is it. This is the break that I've been hoping for. And you celebrate that. You might even share that success with some loved ones. And then just as quickly as it comes, it goes. And it feels like you have to start that process all over again. And some of the people that you covered, they do. And the difference between us hearing about these people and the people who, you know, their dreams have died in the graveyard is the people, again, you know, that they've had around them, the self-fortitude to be able to say, I believe in myself enough to go 61 times instead of 60. I'm going to go that one more time, you know, and trust that this will eventually work out.
I mean, that makes, when you say that, that makes me think of the Lisa Kudrow episode, because remember, and for those listeners or viewers who don't know, she auditioned for the role of Roz Doyle on Frasier. And, you know, everyone knew Frasier was going to be a hit show, and she got it. She landed it. I mean, this was her big break. Amazing. I'm sure she celebrated. And then only 2 days into shooting the pilot, when they pull her aside and say, you know, it's not working. Like, you're not the right kind of funny that we're looking for Frasier. You can only imagine that kind of heartbreak to get your big break and just as quickly have it taken away. And, you know, she would feel like, oh, I'm not that kind of funny. I mustn't be funny. And, you know, if you're a comedic actor, God, what a horrible piece of feedback. But then for her to go on and keep going and land Friends, where she was that perfect, quirky Phoebe Buffay funny that no one else could have ever played. I mean, talk about a journey, having that big break, getting taken away, and then landing something even bigger where she becomes the highest paid actress on TV.
And not only that, they made that role around her. Like, they came after her. It wasn't just, hey, come audition. Like, that role was created for Lisa Kudrow. It really is amazing.
From a smaller role, like you were saying, Dax, from a smaller role that her team at that time was convincing her not to take.
Right.
You know, so
that's right.
It's not often that we get to see while we're in the process of, and Sidney, I'm sure you can personally attest, because I know you do a lot of the research. Not often do we get to see while we're in the process of how this thing is actually going to flush out and work out in our favor. Like, a lot of times it's after the fact, and you can look back and it's like, thank God I did that audition, you know, thank God that I went there and, you know, did all these other things, because now, you know, it's flushed out into this huge, huge thing, you know?
Totally. I mean, we heard someone say once, and I can't remember exactly who it was, so forgive me, but they said that when you're living your life, it feels like random events crashing into one another, like it's total chaos. But when you're older and you can look back on your life, it looks like a finely crafted novel. So everything was working for you. You just couldn't see it at the time. And I think that that's one of the beauties of our show, is that, you know, you can look back on it and it looks like it was perfectly planned that way. But you just have to kind of, in that moment, you know, let the rejection be hard, let it be sad, feel it. We're not saying, you know, skip ahead to the lesson. You know, you have to sit in it for a bit. But if you can have the faith and you can understand that the next thing is around the corner, at the very least as a stepping stone, then, you know, it can help you to navigate and to deal with the heaviness of the rejection in the moment.
And if I may, that's beautifully said. And can I add to that too, if just a small thing? There's almost always a hidden gift inside each rejection, which is interesting. And you have to, if you can recalibrate your thinking that way, it's helpful. Going to that Kurt Warner episode I referenced earlier, his dream was to make the NFL. He's rejected over and over and over again. He finally makes it to the Green Bay Packers. They take him, but they sit him on the bench because the quarterback, Brett Favre, never misses a game in his whole career right up to his retirement. So they cut Kurt Warner after how many, was it a couple of days or a couple of games?
Two games.
They cut him. But if he had stayed with the Packers, he would have never played because Brett Favre never missed a game. Yeah. So because he got cut, that allowed him to take the rest of the rejection and then end up on a Super Bowl winning team as a quarterback. The gift was that he got cut.
Amazing. Really is amazing.
Man, Terry, come on. You better take me to church. Come on now.
So I want
I'm over here like,
So I want to know.
I can't cry again. I got more show to do.
Obviously, we listen to the Rejection. We regret to inform you, the Rejection Podcast. But what are you listening to, Sidney? You can tell me what you're listening to first, then we'll go to Terry.
Sure. Okay, I don't know if you've ever heard of Where Should We Begin with Esther Perel. Do you guys know that show? Okay,
No.
Super cool. So Esther Perel she's a renowned psychologist, and she has a show where she invites couples into her office, and you basically become a fly on the wall listening to couples therapy sessions, like a one-time session. I know, it's really cool. So if you've ever been in a therapist's waiting room and wondered what everyone else was in for, like, this is your chance. It's so interesting. And then she has a counterpart as well for coworkers called How's Work, which is super cool. So I highly recommend that one. I always say you learn more about yourself than you do the couple. So super cool. And then also, I'd be remiss probably if I didn't mention one of our own other shows that I just love. It's called Alone Together, and it's on our podcast network. And like Rejection, it takes a look at a subject that's kind of heavy, loneliness, but it looks at it from a really interesting angle, which is from curiosity. So I think, over the last year and a half, we've all dealt with a certain degree of loneliness. And this show just really pulls the curtain back on that whole subject. And it's really interesting. Like, for example, why you choose the clothes you choose to wear in the morning is directly correlated to loneliness, or why walking barefoot in your house can make you feel less lonely. Like, super quirky and interesting facts all about loneliness, which is something that I think that we all deal with and should probably talk about more.
Awesome. Those are some good suggestions. What about you, Terry?
One of my favorite podcasts is called Against the Rules. So Against the Rules is hosted by the great author Michael Lewis, who did Moneyball and great books. He looks at interesting subject matters from a very different point of view, which I always love. You look at something you've seen your whole life and then look at it from a different viewpoint. For example, he looked at why referees are so hated, and what it is to be the life of a referee, and even talked about, I think, in the NBA, which I never knew, there is a big complex somewhere in New Jersey that has the screens of every NBA game going on at the same time, and 5 or 6 referees watch every game. So if there's a questionable call in a game from the referees on the floor, they shoot it back to New Jersey, and those guys make the call. Wow. Like, I never knew that whole thing happened, that there was this whole, thing going on with referees. So Against the Rules is a great show. The other one I was so intrigued by was called The Bank Robber Diaries, which is a show about a real life bank robber who, I think, he robbed 60 banks just a few years ago. And he's the guest on the show, and he talks about how he robbed all those banks and how he got away with it, and what his life was like as a guy that was on the run with money, and how he would even walk up to a bank, what was going on in his mind before he walked in there, what he said to the teller, how he got away, where he parked his car. Like, it's just an incredible look into just an aspect of life that you would only see in the movies.
Well, I'm into it.
He's just free to roam about the cabin?
Well, no, he got... He eventually did get caught, Alesha, and he did eventually go to jail, but he's come out a changed man, as you can imagine. And then he has the wherewithal. He's very articulate too, which is the most interesting facet of this. And he has a very interesting home life that led to a life of crime. But it's a fascinating look at something as I say, we would only see in the movies.
I love it.
What's the name of that again?
The Bank Robber Diaries.
The Bank. I have to check that out.
I'm into it already. Just your description of it with the Terry voice also takes them to another level.
Oh, it does. That's what gets me in the end of the podcast. It's the Terry voice with the statistics. By then, I'm like a blubbering mess on the side of somebody's road, crying. I'm like, yes, Alesha, never give up. You're almost there.
You guys are
I'm
awesome.
laughing now, but trust me, like when I'm in the moment of it, I'm just like, oh, that's right.
That's the highest praise you could give us,
That's
Alesha.
the key to life.
You guys bring many feels to the both of us. We really enjoy your podcast.
Thank you.
We wish you so much more luck and success. I mean, I don't think you really need it because it's doing well, but thank you again for coming out with this podcast.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Dax.
much.
We
And thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
us.
All right, welcome back to Podsauce. Leisha, it's that time of the day.
It is that time. What is it time for?
What's
Most foul. Oh.
what's wrong with it? We like sang through half of the show.
I feel like we need graphics when it comes to stuff. We're given all this energy and all this pizzazz. Since we don't have backup dancers, I need graphics. So when I say murder most foul, there's like a big tombstone or something like that
I
comes
like that.
up.
Tombstone comes
You
up,
know what I'm saying?
and then someone just dies.
Okay, move right. It just got real. You looked right at me. You're like, and someone just died.
All right, let's hear your murder most foul. I love
It got so
I love
dark.
these. These are always fun because I know how much you love like true crime, so I get a kick out of it.
And not that it's funny, but I do. Let's just go ahead and preface that. But we all have those situations and those scenarios where we've heard a story and we're like, sis, if you hear some the Jason music playing in the background, you don't go into the woods. What are we doing, babe? So hence affirmative murder. Now, affirmative murder hosted by Alvin William and Frankel Evans. It's the Black perspective.
Oh.
It's the Black perspective. You know what, Dax? I kind of would put this in our "if you like this, you'd like that" alongside with "It's Always the Husband." But in this particular situation, it's just different crime stories, right? And the only reason I put them in the same boat is just from the comedic aspect of it.
Okay.
Although It's Always the Husband is significantly more hilarious. No shade, but you know, it just it is. But affirmative murder. So I've only listened to a couple of their episodes. One in particular was just about sunset towns because being from the South, obviously I'm extremely familiar with sunset towns, but I was very curious to hear their perspective on it. And so they cover actual cases. So this one was about this young woman who was out trying to sell encyclopedias and she was subsequently murdered. Obviously there's nothing funny there, but it's just the situational things around it. Like, do I go with the white people that I don't know, or do I go with the white people that I do know, but these are crazy because I work with them. You know what I'm saying? So it's like stuff like that, which obviously makes challenging situations a little more palatable.
Yeah.
But so they cover that, and that case was like in Bettonsville, Indiana, but it was like in 1968, so old school Bettonsville, Indiana. So that was a really good one. Obviously they talk about race issues, race relations, and things like that, but they do it from a comedic perspective. I think we all could use a little more sunshine and ponies these days. So affirmative murder is my murder most foul.
I love how you say it. Say it one more time.
Murder most foul. I need to turn that into a jingle. So
You do.
Are you listening, Jay? So whenever we have this segment coming up, just hit that beautiful bean music.
Well, today was a very fun episode. A big shout out to Terry and Sidney O'Reilly. I mean, we've been talking about their podcast, We Regret to Inform You, a Rejection Podcast, for weeks on end. Today was the day we finally got to sit there and talk to them in person, and it was really cool. So big shout out to them. Thank you for coming on. And I got them on because I knew they would bring tears to your eyes. I knew it.
Such a great job. I mean, they do such a beautiful job. But you're right. You said it in the interview. It's his voice. Like, Terry is so endearing, and he really just looks like that dad that was like the community dad, the neighborhood dad that everyone just like wanted to go, whose house, they wanted to go kick it with.
Yep.
And go see. I'm gonna go see the dad. Terry O'Reilly. So yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today, and thank you all for listening to another episode of Podsauce. Please follow all of our handles. This is Podsauce, the Podsauce. See, you guys harassed me all that time, and then it ended up being our handle.
And if you guys want to check out We Regret to Inform You, go to our website, podsauce.com. We'll have a link straight there to their podcast and any of the specific episodes we talked to them about. All right, Leash. I'm Dax Holt.
I am Alesha Renee, and until next time, be good to yourself. Thank you all for listening.